A very warm welcome to everybody who's joined us so far for this session. The observant of you will see that there are only 4 of us on the screen at the moment, and unfortunately that's because one of our speakers, Laura McKechnie, the Chief Exec of Age UK Bolton, has had to pull out at very last minute, and unfortunately she's been unable to get a replacement to cover her slot. However, we are delighted that we've got Dr. Hannah Marston, who is very familiar with the LIN and has been presenter at various of our webinars over the years since we started. And Hannah, you may not know, this is our 126th happy hour since lockdown, and we went to digital. And we're also joined by Iain Scott, and Iain is a senior lecturer at the Edinburgh School of Architecture. Again, both have contributed to the LIN in blogs and thought leadership, and we're really delighted that they could be with us and give us a very much sort of an overview of the work that they have been leading on in creating an understanding around age-friendly communities. But on the background of this is very much comes to something that happened only last week, and that was the winning of the Sterling Prize by Appleby Blue, the Almshouse in South London, with United St Saviour's Charity and designed by Witherford Watson Mann. Well, that is a really great example of how to create an age-friendly place, an age-friendly community in the heart of Bermondsey, and that's a really good example. But it's also something that the LIN has held dear to it ever since the LIN was established. And it was something that the Taskforce report that reported nearly a year ago this month outlined in terms of how can UK become a much more age-friendly community. And we, in our own New Year wishes, we top 5 wishes for the year. Number 4 was around we wanted to see more lifelong neighbourhoods, creating connected, healthy and age-friendly communities. So on the back of that, we're delighted that we're joined by Hannah Marston from the Open University, and the LIN has been working closely with the OU on a number of projects, including the Amar Bari Amar Jabon My Home, My Life project with the Bangladeshi community. And we've been following Hannah and her work and very supportive of her upcoming publications as well. So Hannah's going to be touching on that and some of the other work that she's engaged with. And again, if you haven't seen Iain's blog for us, please have a look at that. And we'll post things like that in the chat box as we go along this afternoon. So without further ado, can I welcome Hannah and give you centre stage?
Thank you, Jeremy and Sally. I'm just about to share my screen and we'll start this presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation from HousingLIN to be here and share some current work that I'm currently undertaking. So this presentation will be looking at age-friendly cities and communities, and primarily looking at the affordability from some work that I conducted relating to the age-friendly cities and communities questionnaire through the UK English perspective. For anybody who is unfamiliar with the AFCCQ tool, there's been many validation versions across different countries, languages, and it was initially developed by some colleagues of mine in the Hague University of Applied Sciences, Dr. Jeroen Dicken and Professor Jos van Hoof. The AFCCQ, I'm not going to go into it much. There's a lot of work out there that is available, but it looks at the 8 domains of the WHO's 2007 AFC framework, and this particular tool adds a 9th domain, which is finance. In front of you, you can see all the different flags where at present the findings and validations of the tools are available, and they are open access. We have some that are to be published. The UK version and the New Zealand version are currently under review, and then we have other versions which are in progress. It is very exciting because what wasn't initially established in the WHO AFC framework was the importance of finance, whereas the AFCCQ has established that finance does play a pivotal role and impact relating to age-friendly cities. So why was the AFCCQ developed? Basically, there was no quantifiable measure or tool available for researchers, for practitioners to actually identify as well as evaluate over long term whether the community was or is age friendly or not. This tool has many benefits, and not only from an academic perspective, but also for practitioners, developers, architects, local authorities, municipalities. But it allows for a baseline foundation, say, for example, the local authority who are involved in the global age-friendly network led by the WHO. And they're expected to do a 5-year evaluation cycle. So with that in mind, without quantifiably being able to identify if the community is age-friendly or not, whilst qualitative data, peering case studies and stories is vitally important, but to really look back year by year, you do need a quantifiable tool. The UK version, the English version, as I said, is currently under review. So at the moment, I can't really go into too much detail. But here I've provided some initial information for you. It was an online survey, very different to the other versions available. They were all in person. And I utilised different social media, so Facebook, Twitter. I also utilised different mailing lists. And at the Open University, we have what is known as the Associate Lecturer Forum. And we were able to request responders, if they chose to complete the survey that way. Excuse me, word of mouth as well. And what was very positive about this approach is it was reaching the regular person in the community, those who may not necessarily be invited to be engaged in research through research groups and other organisations. We have had a sample of 426, and also our age groups were 18 to 59 and 60 and over. This will be the third AFCCQ, which takes an intergenerational perspective. And for many of you who are aware of the global guide published by the WHO in 2007, intergenerational was a key feature in the global guide. So what seems to be a current discourse is that age friendliness is about older people. And whilst that should be important, our communities are made up of different age groups, children, as well as people who are middle-aged. And they too have a role to play in this work. It's just a bit of a teaser. What's come out from this version is that none of the questions needed to be amended for the two different age groups. And it does measure age friendliness from an intergenerational perspective. There are other results, and hopefully it will be published before Christmas, fingers crossed. So how is the AFCCQ, the UK or English version, being utilised in a practice environment? At the moment, I'm currently leading a project under the Open Societal Challenges, and it's looking at dementia-friendly through the Milton Keynes perspective. This was the vision of Emily Darlington, Labour MP, one of 3 Labour MPs in Milton Keynes. And together with the Milton Keynes Development Partnership and the Council, as well as Age UK, Milton Keynes, we have this project. But whilst it focuses on dementia friendly, the standpoint I have taken is you can't really go into dementia friendly without ascertaining if the community is age friendly. So at the moment, we are in phase 2. We are data collecting through in-person or paper-based surveys as well as online surveys to truly identify how age-friendly Milton Keynes is. Phase 1 is also ongoing, and that's a very broad church of a scoping review, encompassing both age-friendly as well as dementia-friendly literature and grey literature. So for those who are not familiar with grey literature, that's policy documents published by local authorities or organisations like Housing LIN. The third phase will look at a dementia-friendly city survey, and that will be a validation, which is currently being developed in the Netherlands. I'm originally from Pontefract in West Yorkshire, and we have quite a few train stations. And when I go home, whether it's from Middlesbrough or elsewhere, I have to get off at Monkhill, and this is the Monkhill train station. And it's direct to Leeds, is what I'm saying, so, or to Manchester Airport, actually. And so this is a train that may have come in from Leeds or Castleford, and we're very much aware that accessibility is important within our public spaces. But as you can see, there is no elevator here. There never has been. And many a times I've been there with large luggage. I've never seen anybody leaving the train with wheelchair or other mobility aids. I'm not able to talk about, you know, what happens there. But as you can see, it's you may think it is run down. It is kind of run down. It's very open. It's very isolated, especially in winter. You do see the lights, but if you were having to walk into the town centre, it's very I wouldn't do it, basically. This is Milton Keynes, well, a part of Milton Keynes, a district called Pence Hill. For those of you unfamiliar with Milton Keynes, there's approximately 1,800 redways. Redways are the red paths, and behind the bushes, you've got the main road. And many people use the redways for cycling, going for a walk, and they connect the city together. Back in 1999, there was a published paper by an OU academic talking about the challenges and benefits to the redways, one of which was antisocial behaviour, in so much as, you know, they are, again, very isolated even during the day. This area is not too bad. It's approximately a 15-minute walk to the Open University campus. And as you can see from the different photos, there's different means. You know, we've got steps. We do have robots roaming around the city. That's not, it's kind of familiar at times, and they do deliveries, small deliveries, fish and chips, and you order via an app. You will also see them if they're mapping out new areas of the city for them to then deliver to that area. We also have electric charging points, and the same for the OU campus. And Stony Stratford. Stony Stratford is one of the 3 kind of villages that make up Milton Keynes. Stony's, you've got Newport Pagnell and Bletchley, of course. This little side street is off the main high street. It's a one-way system, and you can see that, again, accessibility is also an issue. Some of these cottages are 200 years old. The high street, it's a lovely high street. I used to live here, and you've got a butcher's, a bakery. It was very handy during the pandemic. And some of these photos were taken during the pandemic, and there was stickers on the floor outside the bakery, you know, for the queuing. Middlesbrough, I currently live in Middlesbrough, and for those of you unfamiliar of Middlesbrough, it's just south of Newcastle. It's one of the most deprived areas in England and outside of London. And and this is part of the town centre. There's a few more photos I want to show. We have quite a lot of park benches, different styles of public seating. We do have floor lighting. We do have some green space. And in the top corner, where there's the blue building, those buildings or houses used to be terraced houses, and they've been transformed into bars, restaurants, cafes, accountants, hairdressers, and it has actually brought a different life to two streets there. This is more of the town centre. You can see more of the different benches. Like many towns and cities across the UK, Middlesbrough has been impacted by footfall, and many shops are closing down and moving to Teesside Park. The university campus is smack bang in the town centre. It's literally a 5-minute walk if you were in between classes and you wanted to go into the town. This is Linthorpe Road. Again, you can see Linthorpe in the couple of the photos there. A few years ago, the old mayor of Middlesbrough decided to install a cycle lane, and there are plans to remove the cycle lane because it causes a lot of problems for traffic and emergency services. I'm going to show you a photo. So you can see between these two photos here, we've got the pathway, the cycle lane, another pathway with the bus stop. We've still got 2 lanes of traffic, and then another pathway on the opposite side. What has transpired, because there's all the shops on this road, many of them were not happy about the cycle lane going in because of deliveries, customers just coming by and popping in. But emergency services, you can see in the other photo, there's a bus. What has happened a bit further down this road, there's another bus stop. So if there was an emergency, an ambulance, police car, that it becomes bottleneck, and that's a problem. And that never seemed to be considered when this cycle was going in. So age-friendly cities and communities, much of the literature focuses on generally older people. However, there is a sub-population within older people, and that's people who are aging without children. And there's different reasons why people age without children. And there's very few statistics focusing on people who are aging without children. It's not just older people, it's people in their 30s and 40s, could be for financial as well as the reasons there, you know, choice, fertility issues, geographic displacement, etc. I'm drawing this to your attention today because I think it's important that literature and applied research and organisations and local authorities who are involved in age-friendly work need to be inclusive. We hear that word thrown around a lot, got to be inclusive. What I don't see is people who are aging without children being considered as part of research or even being asked. You know, they may need different services, their expectations may be different. Some of these individuals may not even have any extended families, so cousins or nieces and nephews to rely on. We're very much aware of the issues surrounding the delivery of social care in our communities, and people who are aging without children may rely on the delivery of social care a lot more and a lot sooner than people who have children or grandchildren. So just some thoughts for the future. Look at every type of population. You know, it's not just older people. There's people in middle age who are also going to be older in the future. And we also need to start planning for those, what I would term Gen X, so who are approximately 45 upwards. We do all have different needs and experiences and expectations. Some people are more tech savvy than others, and rolling out more with digital with the notion of digital transformation, not everybody will be suitable for that. We then hit the issues of digital literacy. Don't be afraid to push the boundaries. From a research perspective, I always try to push the boundaries, because without pushing and trying to progress discourse, then we don't get any further, and we're talking in echo chambers. I'm from an interdisciplinary background and computer science, and I think it's very valuable that interdisciplinary research should be placed very centrally. So taking into account people who are from architecture, and we're going to hear from Iain shortly, but engineering, geography, because by accounting for different disciplines, different thoughts and different perspectives can be considered as well as implemented. Multi-actor collaborations, we very much are aware that it's not just about researchers and their expectations, but organisations like HousingLIN, as well as Age UK. I mentioned earlier that I work with the Milton Keynes franchise, but local authorities and even more smaller grassroots organisations, they too have a part to play. I haven't gone into the different age-friendly city frameworks, because there's a lot of work out there, but they need to be evaluated. And anybody who's interested in knowing more about that, please get in touch. I've mentioned about transgenerational perspective, and that's from some of my own work and books, but we need to take a more life course, a transgenerational perspective across different age groups. More importantly, finance cannot be ignored. If we don't have money, we can't pay our bills, our rent, mortgage, we can't buy food. And what has come out through the AFCCQ is that finance across the different tools is basically pivotal. That, you know, other areas such as respect and social inclusion are less down the line. For anybody who's interested in knowing more about the finance aspect, I would like to share with you a bit of self-promotion. I recently had this edited book published, and it's actually chapter 12. We have the introduction and conclusions. Chapter 12, who doesn't think about financial security when designing urban environments for older people, gives a very detailed discourse by myself and Joost van Hoof about the history of the AFC and the role that finance plays. And I just want to say again, thank you to Jeremy for providing a very wonderful review of this edited book. Thank you again for listening, and I hope to answer some questions, and looking forward to Iain speak.
Hannah, thanks very much. A really powerful presentation. And I thought also how you drew in some of the practical examples from Milton Keynes, from Middlesbrough, from your hometown as well. It was really, really useful to just put some contextualization in practice as well, but also to demonstrate how often, age-friendly planning is the last thing that comes out, and we still feel that there's a lot of exclusion and not inclusion in the way people both engage, but also what the actual built and urban environment in those cases actually are. So we're going to move on to somebody who knows the urban environment through architecture and through academia as well, and also to look at this through a Scottish lens. So Iain, over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. I will just share the appropriate screen. Is that okay for everyone? Great stuff. Thank you. Okay, nice to meet you all, and thanks again to Hannah for her talk. I enjoyed that very much. Yes, it was very interesting to hear from Jeremy at the beginning about the Stirling Prize winner, which I have to say myself, I was sort of delighted about the almshouse project, which is all to do with urban loneliness, and so it's very much related to the sort of design of the physical environment. You know, involving architects, engineers, planners, and others, obviously. The design of buildings in the 21st century is multi-agency and involves many different disciplines. But that's where we're coming from. We're interested in the physical design of neighbourhoods. Principally, we're thinking about this at a neighbourhood level. So the project that we've been working on is really just at the seed project stage. So it's early doors. We're at the moment, we have a really interesting team together, and we're looking to build this into a larger research project and to get some funding. There are some developments at a Scottish governmental level where we're talking to Public Health Scotland and so on, which I'll explain in a little bit more detail. But our vision is to obviously to involve older people, and not just older people, members of the public, in the design and production of a tool for assessing aging in place, really, the sort of physical environment aspects of aging in place. And we think that this is something that could obviously be of enormous benefit to planners, to policymakers and designers, third sector partners, and also communities themselves. It was really interesting to hear Hannah talking about, you know, her review of the tools that did exist before they started working on the AFCCQ, that there wasn't really anything that allowed for sort of quantification, really, of the aspects of the built and of age-friendly placemaking. That pretty much everything that existed was largely qualitative. So we're also very interested in that. We're interested in developing something that allows for quantification as well as qualitative input. So it's okay. Can I just check? Does everyone see that's on to the second slide now? Yeah, aging in place standard tool background. We start with the Scottish place standard tool. It's a tool that has been in existence in Scotland since 2009, 2015. It's been updated a couple of times. It's a tool which is widely used in Scotland, and it's really quite highly thought of. It's principally used by communities and designers to structure conversations around placemaking and to assess the existing qualities of place. It obviously has a series of domains. It has 14 domains, which is a little bit different to the World Health Organization's age-friendly cities domains. But it's something that's been applied really quite successfully in Scotland. We've found that it's less well known and less well used in England. There are pockets of its use. But we were in the first instance interested in seeing if the Scottish Government was interested in developing an age-friendly version of the place standard tool. Seems like that's not really the case. But I would say that our project is certainly interested in being inspired by this particular tool. As I say, it's been reiterated and it's been updated over time, and it now includes a series of different versions and lenses. It has a children and young persons version. It also has a design version which is used by largely by designers and developers. And then it has what are called lenses, which are where the supporting guidance and the sort of backup qualitative questioning that is provided with the tool is given a slightly different slant or lens. And there are two versions of that. There's a climate lens and there's an air quality lens. So, you know, our question was, you know, if the climate emergency and the aging society are two of the greatest challenges of our age, then why do we not have an age-friendly, an aging in place standard tool in some form? We've also been in discussions with Architecture and Design Scotland, which is the main body in Scotland that promotes good design, principally environmental design, and they did a bit of work in 2018-19, which we really saw as kind of outline work. They published it on their website, but it's not really what we would call, formally sort of published research. It was interesting that they come up with 10 different domains. It's so these things keep changing from the place standard to the Who's framework to this particular framework. And but we thought that this also was interesting work that could really be built on, and it didn't really generate anything in relation to a tool for assessing age-friendly places. And we think there's also the opportunity to develop further design guidance about good age-friendly neighbourhood design, potentially along with some exemplars of that internationally. Who's involved in our project? We've put together quite an interesting little team. As I say, our seed project ran from January to July. It was really a kind of 6-month project, and we did a lot of work in that time. And we were really just interested in seeing if it seemed like there was a desire and an appetite for this thing to go ahead. So there's myself, there's Professor Catherine Ward-Thompson, who many of you involved in thinking about age-friendliness will potentially know. Catherine is one of the founding directors of Open Space at Edinburgh College of Art. And then we've been in partnership with the Advanced Care Research Centre in Edinburgh with Sue Lewis and Nusa Farich. We've also got Kate Gibson, who's a sociologist from Newcastle University with great expertise in housing, working with us, and Ryan Woolrich, who is an expert in urban ageing. He's the professor of urban ageing at Heriot Watt University. We also included a couple of people from our public engagement network, Paul Kelly and Brian Woodrow, and the seed funding that we did get together allowed us to employ a couple of researchers to work on the project, and we produced a final report and a detailed pamphlet of our findings, which is available on the HousingLIN website. Obviously, part of our work was to establish the evidence gap, and as I say, to have a look at all the existing tools that exist. There are many tools. Some of them try to cover all the aspects of aging, from the more sociological and the care-based and so on. Interestingly, Stirling University do have a design tool related to environments, and it works for older people and people with dementia. But it operates really at the sort of scale of the individual building. So it's for individual building owners to be able to assess the age friendliness of their own particular environment. And they've been sort of promising a kind of neighborhood level tool for a few years now, but that's not really come to fruition. One of the things that we were really quite inspired by actually was Hannah's paper that she wrote with Joseph Van Hoof on 10 questions concerning age-friendly cities and their particular inflection through sort of the technological changes that society has been undergoing for a number of years. And we've been very interested in our own project in those developments of sort of technological and digital change, which often is difficult for older people to manage and to navigate, and also climate change and climate resilience, which has had an enormous impact on our communities and neighbourhoods, and again, which Ryan's done quite a bit of work on for us. So our methods, the first thing that we did was we looked at all the knowledge that we had around ageing in place. As a team, we've got quite a bit of experience in this regard. One of the bigger projects that I worked on with Catherine was Mobility, Mood and Place, and we've got quite a bit in relation to that published again on HousingLIN. One of which is a kind of handbook to designing age-friendly places, which I produced with students. We ran age-friendly studios as part of the School of Architecture here, in various places across the UK and in Europe for 3-4 years as part of that project. That was very interesting. So we assessed the existing knowledge that we had. We mapped it to the place standard to see where there were certain domains of the place standard that seemed to be really kind of well covered in relation to age friendliness, and maybe there were other domains that seemed to be less well covered. We conducted workshops with older people in 3 separate communities, both urban and rural, and we went down to Newcastle to do that as well, so that we could get that kind of cross-border perspective. But you know, as I say, we were only really working for 6 months, so it was difficult for us to do more than that. And we conducted stakeholder interviews with key individuals from different placemaking centres, of which Jeremy was one, both in Scotland and England. So yeah, we had Public Health Scotland, we had the Centre for Ageing Better, we had the Town and Country Planning Association down in England, and so on. And we produced as I say, a report for that, which the key findings of that we published in a pamphlet. Our findings really were that our participants found that they liked the place standard. They found it very useful for structuring conversations around place, but they found the 14 domains really quite onerous to complete, and then difficult to sort of keep that in your mind when you were in discussions. And they thought that, as we think, that some domains are more relevant than others to ageing in place. What did they think was missing? Accessibility to health services was a key thing. Obviously, with things like this, we're interested in the spatial dimension of that. So in relation to that, we'd be interested in the sort of placement of health services in relation to a neighbourhood network, as well as physical, more direct accessibility in relation to facilities. They were very, very concerned about their homes and about, and I think Hannah touches on this, about the financial aspects of ageing in place, assessing the affordability, but also the agency that they felt they had in relation to adapting their homes as they got older. Some of them felt a bit lost in relation to that and unsupported. And they were very concerned about the strength and security of social support networks, again, which I think has a spatial dimension. Digitally, there were broad concerns about digital citizenship, but also on a spatial level, concerns about access, spatial access and to spaces, like simple things like, access to car parking becoming digital and people often being excluded from that. That was a real concern. With climate change, people were very concerned about their homes and the risk to their homes from climate events, particularly people who lived close to water courses. They were concerned about accessing health services in extreme weather. And they also felt that little had been done by policymakers to sort of prepare older adults and communities in general for global warming. So that's something that we'd like to further investigate with our own tool. Our next steps, as I said, we're going to try to get some full funding, hopefully. We'd love to take this work on and obviously develop a full funding application and with support from stakeholders, and would be great to have HousingLIN and maybe other people who are here involved in that if we go ahead. But interestingly, we are in discussions with Public Health Scotland over the creation of a standardised and freely accessible tool which can assess ageing in place, which is independent of the place standard suite. So those talks at the moment are ongoing. And in our discussions with Architecture and Design Scotland, they're very interested in accompanying design sector guidance on the design and delivery of age-friendly places, which would include relevant international exemplars. And again, this is a little bit of work that they did in 2019 in relation to their caring place work, which we feel is very much outline work that I think could be expanded and given more depth. So that's my talk on our developing project, and thanks to everyone for listening, and I hope that was understandable.
Well, spot on, Ian. That was great and really built on from Hannah's presentation. And I know my head's buzzing with some ideas and thoughts and questions. And we've got a couple, I think, through from Laurie and in the question and answer box as well. But I think what you've highlighted here is sort of like from across the UK, we're splintered in the way we're addressing this as well. And I think what you've demonstrated is actually the tools are some, if we can synchronise those much more effectively, perhaps with under the umbrella of the WHO or indeed other frameworks as well, would be a real ideal way and sort of making sure that these principles and standards and don't sort of conflict either. So, we're very much struck by both of you how much you've engaged with local communities to draw on that as well. So thanks very much for your presentation. I know that we haven't been able, as a presenters, to give you the localized example from Bolton, but I just wanted to sort of share with you a presentation I heard last week from one of our Southwest groups, thinking about what Dorset are doing in terms of being the 100th age-friendly community in the UK. And I know Sarah's joined us as a delegate, but unfortunately isn't well enough to speak today. But again, they are, as a locality, also a health implementation area for creating better neighbourhood health. So Ian, I think we're slowly moving towards that in the direction of healthy. How is it we can create healthy neighbourhoods across all our 4 nations? But I know in England, the NHS plan have got a core strand is around health creation and creating healthy neighbourhoods. So I think that is something we can work definitely with you taking forward. And Hannah, I think some of the points that you raised around both ageing without children, but also the real pressures around the affordability in later life and communities, building the resilience, both for care support, but also thinking about the mutuality and the reciprocity that needs to be in place to create that sort of mutuality for people, especially where there aren't any children involved. So thanks very much for touching on that.
Thank you.
I'm going to kick off in the next sort of, we've got about 10 minutes or so before we draw to a close. And I do encourage people who are watching, please do post your questions in the Q&A box. And in fact, Laurie has sort of put 2 in here, and I'll just read it out. Does the aging in place tool not need to get into granular detail regarding individual dwelling standards and link directly to building regulations? In the US, there's a qualification of certified aging in place specialists, CAPS, the credential for architects, designers to carry through all their work. If the town is age friendly, but the housing is not, the challenge will still be substantial. So let's just deal with that and whether you're aware of either sort of certification through REBA or other sort of professional requirements and professional development that you're aware of, Ian.
Yeah, well, I would say I'm aware that there isn't any at the moment. It's not a required specialism of architects that they're aware of age-friendly issues and of age-friendly design. It's interesting that, as you said, in the US, that there's a certification standard of good age-friendly housing design. I think that's something in the UK that we could develop, I would think, quite objectively and relatively quickly. I would caution in relation to one thing, though, which is that in the design of cities and then neighbourhoods, and the neighbourhood scale is something that I think all as people just much more able to get a sort of handle on. It's the interrelationship of so many sort of physical and environmental factors that are ongoing, from transport and moving around to housing and living to physical commerce, to the accessibility of public forms of service and so on, opportunities for social engagement, which again has an enormous environmental factor, access to natural space, and green space is another one that is maybe not quite so explicit in certain standards, which is important. So I just would say that you have to watch out when you take one aspect of it. But I would say housing is absolutely, sort of fundamental, as maybe sort of the core of neighbourhoods. It's the sort of meat and potatoes of our cities, really. So I would certainly support that being, the case, that the certification of age-friendly housing would be achievable. Trying to extend that into sort of neighbourhood design would be something that would be much more difficult and complex.
Hmm. Well, I know that the recent New Towns Taskforce report in England, anyway, has sort of highlighted the need for better building regulations per se around Part M42 and M43, and also recognising healthy places are pivotal. And it's not just about the building, but it's also how we encourage our planners as well to think about that. And Hannah, Laurie also asked, why should we need to adapt homes as people age when they can be built based on inclusive design principles from the start? Now, I think it's going to take several generations before we have all inclusive homes. But have you got any thoughts about that trade-off, perhaps, about should I stay, should I go?
Well, I think if we look at the notion of these new homes, what the current government are attempting to do, they could build new homes whereby they are already inclusive, accessible, so you can age in place. I also think it's important, and Iain touched on it, about building regs and education. And I think there would be nothing stopping, in theory, having computer science students, engineering students being given options or merging curriculum in college and at university level and elsewhere in the community about aging. If you're an engineering student, there should be some information curricula about building regs or building for aging populations. There just seems to be a big disconnect. And that kind of filters out into the public and private space. Inclusivity in homes. I mean, it's not part of this presentation, but we know about the energy efficiency for electric vehicles. We don't have, not everywhere is Milton Keynes appropriate, and I'm not, I've lived there, and that there's issues in that environment. We don't have the infrastructure, and the infrastructure is the problem. And I think new build for housing should accommodate wheelchair accessibility if needs be, and have the general what is now needed for people to potentially age in place come standard. We need windows. Why don't we have doors, which I think they are now, but other features within the home, light switches down the lower level of a wall, like they do in many European homes. It's very simple. It's just a change of mindset.
No, that's really helpful, and it's something I know that the LIN advocates through the happy design principles. But I think the point you make around wheelchair housing and other sort of forms of adaptable space is something that Adam questions in his question, and he says, what would the panel say is the real distinction between age-friendly, so being able to age in place, and other aspects such as accessible design for disabled people and good governance in terms of having good adult social care service? How much collaboration is there with disabled people's organisations, and can we address cultural attitudinal attitudes to aging as well as the design aspects? Great question.
Yeah,
Hannah,
it is
do you
a
want to
good
kick off on
question.
that, and then I'll come to Iain?
I would. I'm chomping at the bit. That's a brilliant question. You're right. Aging and disability and age friendliness and social care and building and design, they all need to come together. Everybody has to be at the table, and that doesn't always seem to be the case. So from the age-friendly cities perspective, regarding the literature, there's very little about disability. Jeremy, you're familiar with the literature. There's very little, and that's not good enough. There should be more about disability and engineering and design and housing and transport and walking from your home to the bus stop. What happens if you're disabled? This all features in age friendliness, and this is down to scholars, including myself, although I'm not necessarily in the disability arena, but everybody in the AFC arena has to take some responsibility for not making it more of a broad church.
Yeah. Let me just quickly come back and then I'll open it to Iain. I mean, I think one of the questions Adam asks is, is there engagement more broadly? It's something that we are proud to be a member of the ISPA project with the University of Stirling. And I think a couple of our friends from Stirling are with us as delegates this afternoon. And we've been part of the, apologies if you can hear my dog barking, by the way, we are members of a program called ISPA, which is looking at the intersectionality between ageing and disability as part of something we wanted to develop further called the Inclusive Living Alliance. And I think Sally's just posted that in the chat box if anybody's interested. It's also a really great question because, Adam, I don't know if you're aware, next month's the 30th anniversary of the introduction of the Disability Discrimination Act. And in fact, we've got a series of guest blogs at the moment looking at different aspects of that, from physical disability to learning disability and autism, right through to thinking about sensory impairments and the like, both within the context of the DDA, but also equalities legislation. And I think for inclusion really to be taken forward, it has to be grounded in that broader equalities aspect, and that it becomes one that's around social justice for everybody, and not just for the some. And so we need to think about that age inclusivity as part of that equalities, whether it's around built environment or the or other aspects of support people maintain their independence or interdependence. But rather than me get on my soapbox, Iain, can I put the question back to you? Are there any particular thoughts?
So I just had a particular thought more generally about the idea of inclusive design and accessibility and so on, and maybe in relation to housing more than anything else. I think the one thing that we have to watch out for is to think that there's a one-size-fits-all sort of solution to that, because there always will be, the requirement for some form of change and adaptability as the body changes and maybe goes through particular events and so on, and our physical abilities and capabilities alter. And so I think the key for designers is to build in that opportunity to change. And it's not just a factor of aging. It's an enormous issue for having a more sustainable built environment, because there's so much of the built environment at the moment that it is made so specifically for a particular purpose that you have to then demolish a building once that particular use function maybe changes or goes away. And so we really, one of the challenges that we have as a society and as well as architects is quite generally is to make an adaptable built environment that can change and adapt to to suit our needs. But I think it's being taken much more seriously by the profession. Again, up until the last few years, I would say that inclusive design was seen as a specialism amongst architects, and I think that's no longer the case. And it's reflected in the latest development of the professional criteria by the RIBA, which really embeds it much more deeply. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think just coming back to other sort of groups, we're working with an organisation, a coalition of organisations called Housing Made for Everyone. And, we're very much part of a group with Centre for Ageing Better, Disability Rights UK, the Centre for Accessible Environment, really putting forward propositions that demonstrate and giving evidence to things like the select committees to argue the case for more accessible and adaptable homes, going back to Laurie's point as well. So that's really helpful. Now, I think a couple of other questions may have popped in while we were going on. Robin Darton is a long-term friend of the LIN. Nice to have you with us this afternoon. This does not take into account that the majority of housing is already built, as Jeremy just said. So much so much more focus is needed on retrofit. And Iain, you touched on, I think, sort of implied retrofit, because you also talked about responding to climate change as well. And in fact, probably not only is our stock not age friendly, it's not fit for the future in terms of climate change. So do you just want to come back to that?
Well, I would just say that's an absolutely great point. I meant to make it myself and I forgot. So thanks, Robin.
Well, thanks, Robin,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely fundamental. I don't know what the percentages are, but the majority of our building stock is actually quite old and decaying, particularly in particular issue in Scottish cities. And so retrofitting and building in that inclusivity to the retrofit is of absolutely fundamental importance to us all.
Yeah, and Robin, I think some of the things we've been doing in the LIN on retrofit looks both at retrofit in relation to specialist housing. So we were part of the all-party parliamentary group looking at how do you regenerate our existing sheltered housing, but actually there's a real big issue here around the retrofitting our mainstream homes as well, both in terms not just on the technology point that Hannah and Iain have touched on and climate change, but also how to look at their sort of energy efficiency, their performance, and things like decent home standards as well. Hannah, any thoughts on that? Because you touched on the issues around finance and affordability, and this may be one of the barriers as well when we're looking at retrofit.
Yeah, I mean, retrofit, more needs to be done. But I used to live in Germany and lived there for 3.5 years. And I was in a rented apartment 15 minutes outside of the city of Cologne on one of the main tram lines. And my rent was €650 a month. That didn't change in all the time I was there. I moved in September 2011 and moved out December 2014. When I gave my 3 months notification to my landlord, he increased the rent by €100. And what happens under German law is if you're in a rented apartment and let's say you're there for 10 years, the landlord cannot increase your rent. And of course, we're rather fanatical over here about owning our own piece of land. And landlords, we've seen in the news, many people are given notice to vacate. They have children who are dispersed at different schools across the towns and cities. They're being squeezed. And I just find it extraordinary that we cannot learn from other countries to deal with this rent issue. And whilst we're talking about retrofitting, we can look at how other countries work as well as taking into account evidence-based research. I don't understand why there are problems with retrofitting. It's fairly straightforward. And only, I think, last week on the Jeremy Vine show, there was a piece talking about, forgive me, I don't know the terminology, but these government-backed schemes for filling the cavity wall insulation and how that's caused further issues and damage to people's property. And then they've had to spend thousands to rectify it. There just seems very disjointed, private side of things. It's all about making money rather than looking at the bigger picture and giving people decent homes to live in.
Well, I think that's a really great point. And actually, as you were talking, Professor Julia Mayer posted something into the chat box, and you may know that she was the chair of the Older Persons Housing Taskforce and went over to mainland Europe, and particularly Holland, to look at the example of age friendliness and their task force, which is a 5-year program as opposed to our 1-year program. And I know we probably perhaps invite Julienne to come back and we can look at some of the lessons that she found when she was over there and whether they apply to retrofit. And she touches on issues about some of the measurement interfaces. And, we've got decent homes. We've got, I started my career off as a private tenants rights worker in North London. So again, in those days when you had regulated tenancies. So again, the sort of experience that you had in Germany, sort of, Hannah, was much more common here in the 80s and 90s. And we've created perhaps much more transient and mobile sort of communities, and some of that is forced upon us by the types of accommodation we live in terms of the short-termism. Well, look, you both have really covered this subject in a real breadth that which is wonderful, and it's something that we'll come back to, I know, during the LIN's programs and our happy hours in the future. So on behalf of everybody who's been watching in this afternoon, can I thank you for your participation. I also wanted to say, if this is the first time that you've joined the Housing LIN and our happy hours, we have an ongoing program towards till the end of the year, as well as contributions from a number of members of guest blogs. And again, Sarah talks about the role of OTs. Well, we have a blog next week coming out from Kate Sheehan, who's a leading OT, about her perspective on the role of accessibility and adaptability in relation to the DDA. But next week we have a happy hour which is looking about how to engage much more effectively in local markets. We're joined by Surrey County Council and a law firm to explore those issues, both from a personal centred point but also from a strategic point of view. And then we've got a series of other events coming up, leading up to the end of this calendar year. Apologies, but can I just leave you all by thanking our two guest speakers. We wish Lauren at UK Bolton well, and hope she can join us on another occasion. Can I thank Sally and the team behind the scenes for making this such a positive and really excellent session. I think at one point we were worried about broadband issues and Amazon and the like crashing. So thanks. Thankfully that didn't happen. And if you're around this time next week, please join us for our next happy hour. And I wish you all a happy afternoon. Bye for now.